Welcome to the Online Success Journey podcast, your opportunity to discover and learn from entrepreneurs like yourself. This is not your typical podcast, but a place where you can get the real story and find out how real people encounter speed bumps and detours, but journey through to find success. Now here's your host for the Online Success Journey podcast, Patience.
The Online Success Journey continues, episode 301. Every guest shares the path that took them to success. So you'll want to subscribe right now and ensure you'll never miss a journey. I post at least one journey each week, and I would love for you to join me. Joining us today is Jarod Spiewak, the founder and the leading strategist of Comet Fuel, a boutique strategy-first marketing agency that helps exceptional businesses fuel long-term growth. Hello, Jarod.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming. My audience are excited to hear your story, but just start by telling us one thing we are going to learn from you today that will help us on our journey to success.
Yeah, of course. So I'm hoping that there will be, a couple things that people can take away at a very broad sense. I hope I can provide at least a little bit of value to somebody. Maybe not every question is going to be helpful to everybody, but I'm really hoping to provide at least some amount of value that helps somebody either gain more clarity in their business or be a little bit more confident of where they currently are in their business.
Wow. I can't wait to hear about that. But let's get started with the basics. Can you tell my audience a little bit about your background, about what you did before you started your own business?
Yeah, sure. So, honestly, I didn't do a whole lot before I started my own business. Technically, the first business I ever had was when I was in 5th grade. I was really into horror movies at the time, stuff that most people my age probably just weren't allowed to watch. The Cube, Child's Play, a lot of 80s, 90s horror movies that my dad had on that I just watched with him. And what I did was I would go to the school library every day, and I would essentially just plagiarize the plot of the movie, but have the setting be the school and have the actors be students that I was in the same class with, and I would just kill them off in ways that people died in the movies. And then I would sell the stories, a copy of the story to everybody, because everybody wanted to see how they died this time. So I would sell each copy for $1. I'd make like $4 or $5 a week doing this. And then I just go to the store and I'd buy a Slim Jim for $1 every day on the way back home, walking home from school. So that was the first thing I did for myself. And then it kind of transpired when I was 14, the first day of high school, I decided that I wanted to graduate early. So I essentially did that process. I started college at 15, graduated high school at 16, and because I needed to pay for college a decent amount myself, I had to figure out how to make money. So I started writing online. I started doing some gig work on Craigslist, which isn't the safest thing to do when you're 14, but I essentially just scraped together some amount of way to make a small amount of money, but what I gained was a decent amount of business experience, and that eventually spiraled into, I got a corporate marketing job when I was 17. When I was 18, I left that for a full-time work-at-home position with a marketing agency, and that kind of cemented me in the world of marketing. I had just got my marketing degree at 18, then I started working with that company pretty soon after. And eventually that spiraled into me going from full-time for that agency down to part-time, eventually to no time, where I started my own agency back in 2018 called Blue Dog Media at the time. And in 2021, this year, we have rebranded to Comet Fuel.
Wow. What a journey, Jarod. Wow. You surprised me. You got me there. Wow. What do you do?
Well, to be a bit crass about it, I do it because it's fun. If I didn't enjoy it, I just simply wouldn't do it. That's the plain and simple of it. But to be a little bit more broad is I've always enjoyed business to a certain extent. I knew for a long time that my original plan was that I was going to climb the corporate ladder. I thought that would be my future. I was always interested in business. I just didn't know where in business. And eventually I got involved in marketing, and I've been able to kind of bridge those two interests, one by, owning a marketing agency, which is also, of course, a business, but also taking my business knowledge and experience and being able to kind of relay that to the clients that we work with, where it's not just, okay, great, like run some ads. It's also, okay, great, let's consider your positive cash flow. Let's consider your run rate. And if we're going to run an ad with these numbers, here are the other business things that we need to make sure that we're on the same page about, and kind of bridging those two things together. So in a very vague sense, I do it just because it's fun. And I think it's fun just because I have a massive love for business.
Let's put man aside. How do you know you are successful?
So I think that has changed a lot over the years, and I think it's going to continue to change. Initially, the first time I felt that I was successful was that I was able to make money myself. I started off writing online when I was in high school, making just a couple bucks here and there. And then when I first started freelancing, which is what I did while kind of working the corporate job and the agency, I kind of went from a full freelancer to eventually an agency, I felt successful by just being able to have some amount of sustainable income that I made myself. I started by offering my services on a site called Upwork.com for $5 an hour. And after I felt a little bit more confident in what I was doing, I started charging a much more reasonable rate. And I felt successful then because I had a lot greater control over how much money I was making. If I wasn't happy with, what I was making at my job, I could always do something else. If I really wanted to explore a new marketing channel that I couldn't at my job, I could do that by myself. So that's what made me feel successful initially. And eventually that spiraled into me feeling successful by being able to support myself off of an income that I was making by myself. And I was able to fully let go of working for somebody else. I felt successful by not having to worry about like, oh, am I going to have to get another job somewhere else? Am I going to be able to pay bills and that sort of thing that probably everybody goes through. And from there, sometimes I'll be honest and it doesn't feel that successful. Right now, what makes me feel successful is I feel as though over the past year, I've started gaining more clarity on how I want what I want the business to look like, at being able to let go a little bit more and not work as much, being much more able and capable of saying no to taking on more than we can handle, or to saying no to the wrong fit, even if they're willing to offer us a bunch of money because it's just not what we stand for, or whatever it may be. So that's it's more vague of an answer, but I would say those sorts of things and being able to make those decisions and be confident in them is what's making me feel successful today.
As you mentioned last year, pandemic, everyone knows what happened last year. The pandemic hit, everyone is worried with no more 9-to-5 jobs. Others, they don't know if they will ever go back to work. How did your business pivot?
So in terms of pivoting, there wasn't too much that we had to do. It was more so everything around us pivoted, which enabled us to double our revenue and increase our profit margins at the same time. Because what happened was around March, which is when the US started shutting down. I'm on the East Coast. I think we were a little bit later to the bunch. I think other states around us had kind of shut down beforehand, but slowly, more and more, the U.S. started to shut down and things got a lot quieter. We weren't losing clients. Luckily, we were vital enough to the businesses that we work with that we weren't too worried about that. But for about 3 months, there really wasn't anything new coming in. And it was quite uncertain where the future was going to be, because eventually, even regardless of how good of results that we get, somebody drops off for some reason. They're shifting their business model, their finances are different, they found somebody else that they want to try something with, whatever it may be. So for a couple of months, it was pretty uncertain. But what happened is a lot of people who now started working from home, they had overall, just economically, the US has higher saving rates ever. I don't know about other countries. I haven't looked at like Canada, UK, et cetera. So I don't know what they're looking at right now. But at least in the US, which is primarily where we work with clients, and people had greater savings. And so what happened was a lot more people started businesses, which means we started getting a massive influx of people reaching out because of that. Not only that, but there were a lot of traditional businesses that we wouldn't typically work with that then became potential clients. As an example, we got reached out to by a laundromat based in New York. And what they did was they created an app that allowed people to just book a time where one of their employees would come, pick up their laundry with contact lists, and then bring it to the laundromat. They would do their laundry, then they bring it back to them. without the middleman of like a TaskRabbit or whatever it may be. So that was a typical business model that we wouldn't work with, that we were now enabled to be able to work with. So while our business model itself didn't have to make any changes to adapt, the business world around us was adapting, which enabled us to scale our business more, if that makes sense.
Wow. Thank you. Tell my audience about the magic moment, the day suddenly all went right for you.
Well, I would say there is less so of a moment and more of a transitionary period. There were 2, maybe 3 really big things. One of which was getting away from the entrepreneurial community, which in my opinion has grown exceedingly toxic over the years, where everybody has an opinion on how you should run your business, no matter how successful or unsuccessful you are. Everyone wants to tell you how much better they are, or how bad what you're is doing, or there's always something to look at where you're going to feel bad about something that you're doing. So one of the things that I did, which for a number of reasons, because the current political climate in the US was insane last year, I didn't want to see anybody posting about that. Because of the pandemic, I didn't want to see any more posts about that. It was just, I was just tired of it all. So I just turned a lot of that off and I stopped looking at it. And then I stopped worrying about what was happening in the world, how other people's businesses were doing, how other people thought about my business. And that enabled me just to focus a lot more on what I was doing without worrying about what other people were thinking about it. So that was one thing. The other thing that I would say really made a difference was learning finance. This happened towards the end of 2019, where I started really diving into business finance. I created a cash flow management system. I started understanding just business numbers a lot more. And by understanding those numbers, it allowed us to look at our business from a numerical perspective, and enabled us to increase our overall profit margins. It enabled us to work less. It enables us to do a lot more things that we just simply couldn't do with a basic understanding of finance.
Wow. Thank you. I'll go back to your number one, why you said you stopped looking at the news and reading and hearing how bad you are. That reminds me that line, the interview between Oprah and Steve Harvey, they mentioned that you stay in your lane. Thank you for sharing. You have worked a long time with companies and entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. But can anyone be an entrepreneur, or are some people more cut out for it than others?
At the end of the day, anybody can do it, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be good at it or that they're going to want to do it. If somebody, if you really love accounting, and you want to be the best accountant there is, that doesn't mean that you should start an accounting practice. You might want to stay in the private sector and just become really renowned for just how good you are with improving business finances and profit margins, and helping businesses understand their numbers. And you're able to charge, you're able to make a salary of several $100,000s per year while still working a 9 to 5. Some people are going to be really attracted to that. Other people are going to be really attracted to freelancing. I'll be honest, I made a lot more money freelancing than I do now owning my own business, because when the business makes, for every $100,000 the business makes, there's salaries to pay, there's various other expenses to pay, there's a bunch of tools, there's lawyers and accountants and all this other stuff to pay. When I was a freelancer, I didn't have to worry about any of that. If I made $1, I made $1 minus whatever the taxes would be on that. So, there's going to be people that are going to really want to do something themselves, make $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, however it is that they're going to need to make, that they're able to make working a couple hours a day, and then just spend the rest of the time with their family, their kids, whatever it may be. So everybody's going to be, I think right now, going back to the toxic entrepreneurial kind of system that we live in, is that right now everybody's pushing, like, you have to work for yourself, you have to be in business for yourself. But what's funny is what happens when everybody works for themselves? Who works for those people, right? Everybody is essentially a freelancer at that point. So there's nothing wrong with being really good at what you do and not having to own your own business. I probably wouldn't be here today if I didn't spend, a lot of time working for somebody else. And eventually I figured out that I didn't want to work for somebody else. And, that was good for me, but it's not going to be good for everybody. Not everybody wants to have to worry about meetings with lawyers and accountants and worrying about the finances and wearing 100 different hats. So it's going to be right for some people. It's not going to be right for others. And that's perfectly fine.
What have you learned from business as a whole?
So kind of going back to the social thing as well is that, at the end of the day, you need to do, even if nobody else agrees with you, you have to do what you think is right. If you think you should be using a certain software or billing method or communication method or whatever it may be, even if everybody tells you that that's, incorrect, you should still do what you think is right. You might be wrong and you might fail, and that's fine. That's just part of the process. But if your business the growth and success of your business relies on other people telling you how to run your business, it's not going to end well for you. So I think that was one of the big things for me is being much more confident in my ideas on how to do things, how to run things, how we should approach things, our methods, our systems, etc. And doing that. So when everybody else was saying, oh, you have to hire an army of VAs, you have to have, a bunch of people from the Philippines working for $5-6 an hour, for you. And I said, no, let me use my interest and ability and knowledge around software and programming to create automations that we can then afford to have a much smaller team, which is going to be much more tight knit, that are paid very well, that are there to be experts and remove a lot of the remedial work. Having a much smaller business that's much easier to grow and scale, and that was right for me. It's not going to be right for everybody else. So if I just followed what everybody else said, I'd be running a business that I wasn't comfortable with, because that's just not who I am.
What are you still doing in the way you work that you just know you have to stop doing?
There's as somebody that comes from a technical background that did the work that the company now does, I kind of want my hand in a little bit of everything, and I really shouldn't. But what's good at the same time is going back to one of those things where, you have to do what you think is right. Is at the size that we're at, a lot of the advice that everybody has is, you need to remove yourself from everything. But what I have found is that by still being involved at least a little bit and as much as possible, is that the business has grown much faster, and we've been able to find issues that not everybody wants to say, like, oh, there's an issue here, this could be more efficient. People are fine with, doing things in a way that, this is how we were taught to do it, I'm just going to continue it this way. But wait a second, that's actually really inefficient. Why don't we do it this way, or whatever it may be? So I think that's a really hard decision. To be honest, I think one of the big things for me would be getting away from the super in the trench work, which is something that I still really enjoy, which I'm actively working on, especially when it comes to things that we don't do every day, just because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy learning about it. So even when it comes to design work, we have a designer that builds landing pages and creatives, but I still like being involved in the process of why are we taking that direction? Just because I'm generally curious, but I need to find a better separation between what I'm personally curious about and what's going to be beneficial for the business. And what's beneficial for the business isn't me worrying about what is the process that the designer uses to choose the right font?
What is the most dangerous belief an entrepreneur can have?
I think something that is quite dangerous right now is a couple of different things. One is that everybody needs to own their own business. I think that's I think it's a very toxic mentality. If you go back, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years ago, if you owned your own business, you were kind of seen as an outlier, kind of as an idiot, kind of how people see people that don't own businesses nowadays, is that it was the good thing to do was to find a good business and to work for that business for, 30, 40, 50 years, climb that ladder because that business is going to be around. Don't work for startups. Don't, find a place and be very financially secure. And now that kind of has shifted, but I think it's gone too far where, now we're kind of pushing in a bad direction. I think another Another thing people need to be careful with is the general hustle mentality that is out there. This is very much so how I started. I ended up getting an office space that I no longer have, thankfully, but I ended up getting an office space, and I was working probably 16, 18 hours a day out of that, very much so, quote unquote hustling. I said that I was living the Gary Vee lifestyle without the Gary Vee enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. And so it was just always on. And, that's just, to a certain extent, sometimes there were days that, hey, if I don't do this, even though it's like 9 p.m, somebody just got back to me. If I don't get back to them soon, I'm not going to win that deal and we're not going to be able to pay the bills. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But I needed very much so you get to a point where you have to stop doing that. It's just not sustainable. And it's very bad for your health. It's bad for your mental health. It's bad for your physical health. It's bad for the health of those around you. So I would say those are two of the big things. Actually, a third one real quick is, this one bothers me every time I see it, is people really like, not everybody, but there's something that I've seen a lot where people look down on anybody that doesn't work for themselves, and people will look down on their employees as well. I think that's very toxic, where I'll see somebody who owns a business that says anybody who works for somebody else is an idiot, yet at the same time, they have employees. So what's the reaction that those people are going to have when they see that their boss is saying that by working for them, they're an idiot? So I've just seen that a number of times, and that bothers me really bad every time I see it.
Wow. I hope you'll be there to at least shift a few minds to your direction. But yes, I'm glad you talked about the Gary Vee. This hustle, I'm like 70 hours per day. Gary, is 24 only hours we got. But I don't know. I'm glad you tried it. If you could rerun the first year of your business, what would you definitely not do?
Ooh, there's a lot of things. I think one of the things I would have done is I would have planned a lot more. I tend to have either one of two modes. I either don't plan anything at all and I just jump in and hope for the best, or I really meticulously plan everything out. And there's, both sides of the spectrum aren't necessarily good or bad. But when I initially started, I didn't really have much of a plan. When I officially went on my own, I got an office space, which is really stupid because I still lived with my parents at the time. So for whatever reason, it made more sense to me, instead of getting my own apartment, was to get an office space to work out of, which just made zero sense. So I think I would have taken some more time to plan, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who do we want to work with? Why do we want to work with them? And get away from a lot of the kind of quote unquote experts that I was listening to at the time, which sounded like, everybody online says that they make $1 million. And then when you get to or around that level, you start to realize that, nobody that actually is there believes in that, or nobody actually does it. Like, that's just simply not applicable. So I would have gotten away from listening to a lot of the people that I listened to early on. And I would have listened to, much more vetted professionals, if you will.
What is the most valuable thing you have ever given away?
It's might make me sound quite crass, but one of the things I would say is time, like my time. But at the same time, it feels quite awkward saying that my time is so valuable. It sounds quite rude. But at the same time, it's I try to be as responsive to people as possible. When somebody reaches out and says like, I'm just starting, like, here's an issue that I have with my business or my marketing or whatever it may be. I try to take the time, even if I'm not getting paid for it most of the time, I'm not, to write an answer. And sometimes I will take, an hour and a half. Sometimes I'll jump on a call with somebody, answer their question or whatever it may be, look at an ad account, look at an analytics account, look at a website for them, just because, there were plenty of times where I needed to know how to do something, and I couldn't afford to pay somebody a couple $100 an hour to tell me how to do it, but nobody else wanted to, so I just had to learn the hard way. So I try to, when as much as possible, when someone reaches out to me through the website, through LinkedIn, through whatever, and asks me a question, to do as much as I can to help them, even if they're not paying me.
Oh, thank you so much. We need you, Jarod. So the good road will reward you in the future. Don't worry about now. What is one thing that has contributed to your success?
I think something that has been quite helpful to me is so I'm quite obsessive when I'm learning. I say that when I learn, it's like a sponge that's discovered cocaine. I just absorb everything in a very fast and aggressive manner. And one thing that has been very good for me is just about every good like blog, website, YouTube video channel, course, book, whatever it may be, that somebody that I respect says is good, I'll buy that. But I won't necessarily look at it right away. I have right behind me probably about 150 books or so. I've read maybe 10 of them. But what I do is they're all organized by topic. And when something becomes an issue in my life that I need to solve, that's when I dive deeper onto that topic. It makes it so I'm not too distracted on things that aren't relevant to me at that time, and that I'll actually have a reason to implement what I'm learning rather than just essentially. So going back to finance, what I mentioned earlier is I have a bunch of books on finance, personal finance, business finance, etc. And December of 2019 is when I looked at the way that we're currently managing our cash flow, which was non-existent. And I thought, I don't know how much money we can safely spend. I don't know how to know what our numbers actually are. I don't know how to properly look at our numbers. Let me go and read, the 4 or 5 books that I had that I knew were primarily about finance, and then implement all of that right away, which made a big impact because I knew that was the biggest issue I was facing at that time. And because that's when I sat down and I decided to absorb all that knowledge, I had the perfect reason to apply it right away. So that's one thing that's been pretty good for me, is that I have you should see my Trello boards. I have literally thousands of different cards, all organized by topics, that I completely ignore until it's worthwhile for me to actually read that and actually gain that knowledge, so that I'm not sitting here all day reading stuff that I'm not going to apply.
What grounds you?
I would say that's something that I should work on more, to be honest. I tend to always be switched on, but I think something that I come back to a lot is just thinking of, do I sleep well at night? Do I feel as though that I've done, what's right, quote unquote? So I know plenty of businesses who make more revenue, because if you break down, what a business is, it's essentially just something that makes money, and a lot of people look at it pretty binarily. The more money you make, the more successful the business. But I know plenty of people who have businesses that have higher margins than us, who make more revenue, who the owner works less, is less involved with the business. But at the same time, I also know them well enough to know that the quality of work that they provide is very low, that they use very predatory sales tactics to get people in, and they're really misleading people. But at the end of the day, they're making a lot more money. But if I ran that business, I wouldn't feel satisfied or happy with what I was doing. So I think that a lot of that is what grounds me, is just being, am I happy with where we are? Even if there is another opportunity, like, oh yeah, like we could do this and make a lot more money, and I could work a lot more and do this, but we're good where we are. And I think that is what enables me to pay less attention to what everybody else is doing, and work less than I could if I wanted to, because we're doing what I think is right and what allows me to sleep well at night, if you will.
Do you have a mentor?
Kind of going back to it, I don't like listening to other people too much. So
Okay. Yes
and no. I tend to be very specific, where everybody knows a little about a lot. But so when it comes to people, I know that X, Y, and Z person is really, really good when it comes to people. Like, I'm just not the greatest people person. I know when it comes to hiring, firing, engaging with employees, engaging with team members, making people feel involved, they are amazing at it. But I also know well enough that they are not the person to talk to about other subjects. And so if I have a question about a particular topic, I usually have somebody that I can rely on if I'm really stuck and I just have no idea how to approach the situation. But I try not to rely on 1 or 2 people for everything, just because I know that there's, even if they have an opinion, they're probably not the right resource for those things.
Okay. What is the most valuable thing few people you have relied on has told you?
So something I said earlier is a quote from Dave Chappelle, which is his quote is you need to do what you think is right, even if nobody around you agrees with you. And that goes back to he was originally offered, I believe, $50 million to do something, and at that time, he didn't have that kind of money. So he walked away from that deal and he went to South Africa for, I believe, about 15 years or so. And it was a big issue because he got into a lot of predatory deals where he was forced to sign things at a very young age that he didn't understand. Essentially, he didn't own the rights to his own show or to his own name, and he wasn't getting paid for the things that he created. And so I think Dave Chappelle is somebody that I've been paying a lot of attention to and that I have looked at a lot when it comes to being a little bit more relaxed and just kind of following, making my own path, if you will.
Let's talk about your business. Tell us more about it and who can really use your business.
Yeah, of course. So we are Comet Fuel. We're a boutique marketing agency. That means that we only work with a limited number of clients at one particular time. As of right now, it's about 24 or so. And the reason why we work with a small number of clients is because we're a small, tight-knit team that tries to spend as much time and energy as possible on improving what we do rather than just going out and making a bunch of sales. And so the services that we offer are search engine related. So we do SEM, search engine marketing, so running PPC ads, as well as SEO, which is improving organic visibility. And with that, there's a bunch of things with it, content writing, landing page design, digital PR, just kind of all the stuff that falls under those services. We primarily work with e-commerce, e-learning, service-based businesses, and those sorts of businesses, usually not brand new businesses, usually more established brands, just because there's things that we can do that we can't do with businesses who are just starting for the types of strategies that we use sometimes, but usually not. But those are the types of businesses that we work with. That's the type of work that we do. I'll be honest, we're usually not an entry-level company to work with. We're usually looking for somebody that has a solid business and marketing acumen ahead of time. So if it seems like a good fit, feel free to reach out. If not, we produce plenty of content. I produce plenty of content. Feel free to, sit there or ask me a question or read or listen or whatever it may be.
What is your start fee?
So on the Google Ads side of things, we're usually looking for companies that are spending at least $5,000 a month or more on ad spend. In terms of what we're charging them, it depends on how complicated their situation is. Sometimes for people at that spend, it's very, very straightforward. One campaign, one ad group, a couple keywords. Other people, it's dozens of campaigns integrating with a bunch of different software, and it's a lot more of a headache. On the SEO side of things, we're usually charging at least $2,000 to $3,000, but usually $3,000 or higher.
And how can we connect with you?
So you can go to cometfuel.com, and if you're interested in potentially working together, there's a request a proposal button you can click on. And if you want to get in touch with me personally, you can connect with me on LinkedIn and then send me a message.
Thank you. There will be more from Jarod in a moment. If you are listening to this on a podcasting platform and you are encouraged by Jarod's journey, please go to our website at onlinesuccessjourney.com. The site has tons of audio clips from hundreds of successful entrepreneurs' guests' journeys, all there to help you find a path to your own online success journey. The site offers exclusive members-only content, and you can join absolutely free and be part of this amazing online success community today. Check it out. That's onlinesuccessjourney.com. Now, Jarod, I would love for you to share more with my audience if you're up for it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Do you like to read or to watch movies?
A bit of both. When it comes to movies, I'm very particular with what I watch, just because I tend to get into them, quite a bit in a bit of a nerdy way. Like, I'm really fascinated with how they're made more than anything. So certain movies, I'm like 1914 had amazing, just one shot takes, which are just the way that they did those was incredible to watch, both how it's done on screen as well as the actual back end of how it was done. When it comes to reading, I try to, as I mentioned, just try to be very topical about it. So if I'm facing an issue and I feel pretty confident in how I'm going to solve that, then I'm typically not reading anything. If I'm trying to solve a particular issue and I don't know how I'm going to do that, then I'm usually being quite obsessive, reading, as fast and as much as I can to figure out how to solve that problem. Books. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us, what is your favorite book that has some relevance to being an entrepreneur?
I would say Profit First is the book that has been the most impactful for me. That was really, that was the primary book that helped us get our finances together, helped us create a cash flow management system. And I think that up until that point, we were a lot less put together than we are today.
If your business was down to its last $100, how would you invest it?
I probably wouldn't. I would just focus on creating content, which is free. I would be producing, a lot of what I do right now. I'd be emailing people. I'd be trying to get on their podcasts. I'd be producing YouTube content. I'd be writing blogs. A lot of that isn't going to cost me much of anything. If I had to spend the $100, what I would probably do is figure out which of any of those that I've done that has been the most successful, that people like the most, and then run ads against that piece of content to get more people to see it.
What encouragement have you got for my audience who are not quite there yet?
I would say it's a bit of a dichotomy. First is don't listen to other people, do what you think is right. But at the same time, which is the complete opposite of advice, is that any issue that you're currently having, somebody else has already solved. Don't follow what other people are doing. But if you don't know, if you can't afford to hire anybody to run your ads, to build you a website, etc., there's 1,000 videos on YouTube for step-by-step how to do that. Not only that, but if you're in an established industry, there's probably already something out there for your exact industry, how to create an ad for your industry, how to create a website for your industry. There's probably pre-built websites and themes, and whatever it is, somebody else has already solved it. It might not be the exact solution that you're looking for, but it's not going to be a complete shot in the dark for you either.
If you are going to keep a note to yourself in your pocket every day, what would you be written on it?
It would be what time I should stop working. And that's actually a note that I used to have, not in my pocket, but I have 2 monitors. In the center of the monitor is a camera. And I had a sticky note right on the camera saying, stop working by 4, because I typically get started around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. And my note was to be out of the office, which is just a room, by 4, and to be in a different room doing whatever else.
What is your next chapter?
There is something that is very big that will definitely be the next chapter. Unfortunately, I can't legally say what it is just because it's under lock and key right now. But what I can say is that we've been working on rebranding since 2019. About a year after I started the company, I knew that I wanted to take a different approach. And we started building out in the back end what that would look like. In 2020, we started actually building that out. And I would say about 2 months or so ago, we actually launched the Comet Fuel brand. So this is essentially the start of our next chapter. And we have something else that's very big that's in the works. But unfortunately, that is a legal matter that I can't disclose.
Are you going to come and tell us about it in the future?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to.
Okay. Do you feel like you succeeded or like you are only on the way?
I feel like it's a bit of both. I feel like in the macro, I'm on the way. If I'm looking at, if I was going to, morbidly die tomorrow, then, I feel as though that I haven't done everything that I wanted to do. But day by day, I feel as though that, especially within the past year, that, in the micro day by day, that things have been very successful, that I'm on the right path and that I'm happy with where we are and what we're doing. But at the same time, I know that if I was where I am today, 2 years from now, I would not be happy with that.
Would you ever stop?
It's something that I've debated. Probably not.
Remind us how we can connect with you.
Of course, you can go to cometfuel.com, or if you want to talk to me personally, you can reach out on LinkedIn.
Jarod, it's been great to have you here to share your online success journey with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. That's a wrap. Remember, success is a journey. Patience and Jarod.
This is not the end of the journey. We hope you've enjoyed listening to Patience and her guest and want you to know there are hundreds of episodes available at onlinesuccessjourney.com. Patience would like to thank you for listening to the podcast, and she has a free gift for you on her website, including an audio compilation of her guests' best tips, uplifting stories, and even a bit of fun. Additionally, there are special clips of over 250 episodes that have never aired on the podcast, and they're only available to members of the Online Success Journey. Check the website and click on Join Now to get free and instant access. Of course, you know that listening to the journeys of others helps each of us chart our own path. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite platform to be notified as each new interview is posted. There are so many ways to stay connected to the Online Success Journey and listen in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we appreciate your help in telling others. One of the best ways to share the benefit you get is to rate and review the podcast at iTunes and other sites. We appreciate your help and your willingness to share your journey. One last thing. If you're feeling a bit lost or overwhelmed on your own journey, Patience can help. Check out her course on clarity while you're at the website. Finding clarity is a great way to get back on the right path. On behalf of Patience, and until next time, thanks once more for listening. It is our hope that this podcast will guide you on your own online success journey.